The garden at the rear of our Bath townhouse bloomed in bright colors, strewn with bunting and balloons. It was Eleanor's 8th birthday, and I had gone all out with the preparations, ponies, fairy cakes, and even a face painter. I remember the sunlight glinting off the silver ribbon on her gift, and the sparkle in her eyes when she tore it open to find a digital drawing tablet, something she had longed for. My husband, Charles, stood beside her with a grin so wide it almost convinced me it was real. He tousled her curls and gave me that charming glance he reserved for public display. The doting father, the devoted husband. A picture-perfect family scene. But then, as I cleared away the cupcake wrappers and ushered the children back inside, my phone buzzed. A message from Emma, my assistant. "You need to see this." Attached was a video, shaky but clear enough. Charles, in his favorite navy coat, dining by candlelight at a brasserie in London. Across from him sat a woman far younger, with glossy hair and a laugh that came far too easily. She leaned forward, brushing his hand. A gesture so intimate it made my stomach twist. The timestamp was from 3 nights ago. He had told me he was in Edinburgh on business. I had even packed his travel bag. I stood frozen in our kitchen, the hum of the dishwasher suddenly deafening. I did not confront him that night. Not when he kissed me on the cheek and poured us both a glass of wine. Not when we tucked Eleanor in and talked about booking a family trip to Cornwall. Instead, I watched. Watched how easily he lied, how naturally he slipped into the role of husband, father, provider. And as I lay awake beside him, the seed of something colder began to take root. I had spent years building our life. My law practice, our home, our child. And now he had risked it all for what? Some pretty little distraction. No. I would not weep. I would not scream. I would plan. Because if Charles thought he could make a fool of me, he was about to learn who he had married. The name came to me from Emma the very next morning. Tessa Whitmore. A quick search told me she was 26, from Sussex, recently moved to London. No public job title, but her Instagram was a curated gallery of rooftop dinners, boutique hotels, and designer handbags, none of which she could possibly afford without help. Every few posts, the same detail caught my eye: Charles's navy Maserati parked just behind her, partially visible in the background like a ghost of betrayal. He was being sloppy. He thought I would never notice. That I was too busy managing clients and courtrooms to look too closely. But I saw it all. Every post. Every story. Every false smile on her face as she lounged in my life, draped in things bought with my sacrifices. I did not pity her. I studied her. She liked matcha lattes, took Pilates classes in Mayfair, and once posted a book she was reading, a romantic thriller with the spine untouched. She was pretending, desperately so, to be something more than she was. And that gave me a way in. I contacted Isabel, an old friend from university now working in PR. If anyone could get the backstory on Tessa Whitmore, it was her. We met at a quiet wine bar in Kensington, where the walls were dark and the staff discreet. Isabel arrived in black heels and sharper instincts. "You want me to find out everything, don't you?" she asked, swirling her glass. "Where she's from, who she's dated, what shade of lip balm she wears." "No," I replied coolly. "I want leverage. And then I want her gone." She didn't flinch. Isabel had always loved a challenge. It took less than a week. Tessa had grown up in a modest town, had a stint as a receptionist in a spa, then latched onto a circle of London influencers desperate for attention. She was clever in a social sense, knew how to dress for the room, how to flatter older men without appearing obvious. But emotionally, she was unsteady. Abandoned by her father, raised by a mother who cared more about Botox than birthdays. According to one of Isabel's sources, she had been seeking affection her whole life, using charm like a fishing line. Now she thought she'd caught Charles. But what if someone else came along? Someone younger. More alluring. Someone who would show her exactly how it felt to be adored, and then discarded. I knew it would take someone special. Not just a man who looked the part, but someone who could act with restraint, someone who wouldn't crumble under her glossy smiles or lose focus when the trap began to tighten. I needed a man who could seduce her, yes, but more importantly, one who could outmaneuver her. And that's when I met Nathan. I met Nathan at a gallery in Soho. Not by accident, of course. He was recommended by Isabel's more discreet network, men trained in performance, subtle manipulation, charm. Former actors, some. A few with pasts darker than I wished to ask about. Nathan stood by a contemporary sculpture, wine glass in hand, eyes scanning the crowd without haste. He had the quiet magnetism of someone who didn't need to speak to be noticed. Tousled dark hair. A tailored coat. A faint scar beneath his lower lip, the kind that made a woman want to ask the story behind it. "Mrs. Everly?" he asked, once I approached. "Call me Lydia," I replied. His eyes met mine. Calm. Calculating. No arrogance. No false warmth. Just understanding. We moved to a corner of the gallery where no one could overhear. I laid everything out. The marriage. The affair. The girl. "You don't want her destroyed," he observed. "You want her disillusioned." Exactly. I don't take long-term assignments anymore. But this one sounds personal. It is. He sipped his wine. Then nodded. "I'll do it. On one condition." "Which is?" "You don't interfere. Once it begins, you're hands off. No sudden messages. No panic. No guilt." "I won't panic." "Good. Because I'll be lying to her. And eventually, she'll be begging me to be honest. If you so much as blink at the wrong moment, it all collapses." I agreed. And so it began. First, the encounter. He was to accidentally bump into her outside a cafe in Notting Hill she frequented every Thursday morning. A spilled drink. A polite apology. A quick laugh. An invitation to replace the coffee over brunch. It worked. Tessa posted a picture of her matcha the next day, and there he was, barely visible in the background, blurred just enough to seem accidental. But I knew him. I recognized that coat. Then came the messages. The slow flood of attention. He sent her little articles, memes, compliments that weren't too direct. Just enough to make her wonder. A week later, she posted a quote about being seen for who you really are. I almost laughed. He hadn't kissed her yet. But she was already his. Nathan was good. Very good. He never rushed. He never showed his hand. And he never once gave her the power to define what they were. That's what kept her coming back. She wanted control. He made her earn it. I watched it all from the outside. Her posts became more frequent. Softer in tone. Less glamorous. Less curated. It was as though she had begun to believe this mysterious man had reached into her soul, offered something real. Something Charles had only ever pretended to give. And Charles? He was too busy to notice. Too blind to imagine that the woman he had cheated on was orchestrating every breath the mistress took. But even I didn't realize what Nathan would uncover once he got too close. The affair was now twofold. Tessa still clung to Charles, though more out of habit than desire. He gave her expensive dinners, hotel suites, jewelry she flaunted in filtered photos. But her captions grew distant. There was a shadow behind her curated smile, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. And then, there was Nathan. He texted her with restraint, used silence as a weapon. He never appeared too eager, which only drew her deeper into the game. She began chasing him. not the other way around. One Saturday morning, I watched from the other end of the street as Nathan met her at the entrance of a boutique lingerie shop in Chelsea. She had no idea I was parked just across the road, behind tinted glass, hands clenched tight on the steering wheel. She wore a trench coat over a pale silk dress. Her hair curled just so. She looked like someone preparing for a film audition, desperate to impress a casting director. But Nathan barely touched her. He gave her a gentle kiss on the cheek, stepped back, and let her lead the way in. Distance. Mystery. Control. Inside, he allowed her to pick lace. Red. Black. Ivory. She giggled as she held each one against herself. I watched her through the front window, hidden by a cafe umbrella. It should have shattered me. But all I felt was cold satisfaction. This was a trap built of temptation. And she had walked right into it. Later that day, Nathan sent me a message I hadn't expected. We need to meet. Somewhere private. We met in an old pub tucked beneath the arches in South Bank, the kind of place where the wood smells like 100 years of spilled beer and secrets. He was already seated in the far corner, pint untouched, jaw tight. She's more than what you told me, he said without greeting. She's a homewrecker who plays victim, I replied. Is that not enough? Nathan leaned back, eyes narrowing. She's fragile. Not weak. There's something under all that gloss, panic. Fear. Guilt. Don't get personal. I'm not. But I need to know everything. I hesitated. And then I told him. About the envelope I had once found, buried under Charles's files in his home office drawer. Letters. From Tessa. Not just seductive notes, but declarations of love. She wasn't just a fling. She wanted a future. One letter, dated back to a year ago, mentioned a pregnancy scare. Another. A handwritten itinerary for a getaway weekend in Paris. The weekend Charles told me he was at a corporate retreat in Surrey. Nathan read every word in silence. I thought this was about payback, he finally said. But it's about betrayal on every side. You said no guilt, remember? I snapped. He raised a brow. That promise works both ways. For the first time since this began, I felt the line blur. He wasn't just acting anymore. And I wasn't sure I was either. The 10th year of our marriage was not meant to be celebrated. And yet, there we were. Charles booked a private room at the Grafton, a lavish dining club in Mayfair filled with velvet chairs, flickering chandeliers and too many mirrors. The reservation was under Mr. and Mrs. Langford. I had agreed to attend out of politeness, or so I told him. In truth, it was a setup. Tessa would be there. So would Nathan. Everything was timed to unravel that night. Charles had tried to win me back over the last month. There were apologetic glances, flowers delivered to the house, even a clumsy attempt at couples therapy. I played along, letting him believe I was beginning to soften. He didn't know what was coming. I wore a navy silk dress, modest but severe. My hair tied in a low knot. Charles said I looked like the woman he fell in love with. He had no idea I had become someone else entirely. Tessa arrived late. She walked in with her head high, fingers adorned in new rings, her lips painted a bruised red. On her arm, Nathan. He wore a charcoal suit and that same unreadable calm. His presence beside her was like smoke drifting into a room, it changed everything. Charles went pale. Tessa stopped mid-step when she saw me seated at his side. Eleanor. She gasped. I smiled. Tessa. You look, well. Nathan said nothing. But his eyes flicked to mine for the briefest second. I gave the tiniest nod. It was time. The maître d' awkwardly scrambled to arrange another table close by, pretending not to notice the tension slicing through the air. Dinner was chaos beneath a civil shell. Charles could barely concentrate on the wine list. Tessa giggled too loudly. Nathan, ever the phantom, made polite remarks and let her fall further into her own obsession. I watched Charles shift in his seat every time Tessa leaned into Nathan. The man he had stolen from me was now being stolen from him. By dessert, Tessa snapped. "I need air," she hissed, pushing away her glass. She stormed out towards the terrace. Charles followed seconds later. "And Nathan?" He waited a beat, then stood. But instead of following, he turned to me. "You should hear this." We walked silently out to the terrace, just beyond the stone archway. Charles was facing Tessa. "You brought him here," he barked. "You said I was free to do what I wanted." She spat. "I thought we were more than secret meetings and hotel sheets. You were supposed to wait." "For what?" "For your wife to disappear. For your daughter to forget who you are." I stepped into the light. Charles turned white. "Eleanor. Please. Continue," I said coolly. Tessa's face crumpled as realization dawned. Nathan stepped beside me, silent and still. "You used me," she whispered, eyes wet. "No," I replied. "You used me first. Now we're even." The night had cracked wide open. But the final blow was still to come. It should have ended there. I had delivered my message. Charles had watched his fantasy implode. Tessa had tasted the bitterness of betrayal. Nathan had played his part to perfection. I thought that was the end. But then, something shifted. 3 days later, a plain white envelope arrived at my office in Bath. No return address. Inside was a single folded letter, handwritten in black ink. Neat, measured, and heartbreakingly restrained. It was from Nathan. He wrote with startling clarity. "Eleanor. You asked me to play a role, and I did. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being just a role. I lied to you once, when I said I never get attached. I lied to her too. But what you should know is this, none of it was ever about the money in the end. You said we're even now. But I don't want to be even. You wanted revenge. I wanted something else." The letter ended with an address in Oxford. "A converted bookshop," he said, quiet and unremarkable. He would be there until Sunday. I read it twice. Then burned it. I told myself it was over. But the lie tasted like ash. That night, I stood by the window of my daughter's bedroom, watching the light rain patter against the glass. She was asleep, curled under a quilt, blissfully unaware of the war her parents had just waged behind velvet curtains. Charles had not returned home. Not properly. He came and went as if unsure of his place. I didn't speak to him. I no longer needed to. He had lost control of everything he once took for granted. And that was enough, for now. But Nathan's words burrowed beneath my skin. I wanted something else. What did that mean? I found myself tracing back every moment with him. The lingering glances. The softness when no one was looking. The way he never pressed, never asked for more than I offered, and yet somehow made me feel exposed. It wasn't the same as what I'd had with Charles. It was quieter. Older. Wiser. And somehow, real. Saturday arrived. Oxford was only 90 minutes away. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my secretary. Not Charles. Not even the sitter. I wore no makeup. Pulled my hair into a scarf. Just another woman on a train, carrying a coat and a question. When I reached the shop, dusk had already begun to fall. The shutters were half down. The lights inside were warm and flickering. I stood at the door for a long time before pushing it open. The bell jingled. And there he was, behind a small wooden counter, arranging books. He looked up and smiled. "You burned the letter, didn't you?" he said softly. I blinked. "How did you know?" I would have done the same. There was a long silence between us. Comfortable. Strange. Then he said, "Are you here for another game?" I shook my head. "No," I whispered. But before I could say more, a voice behind me. "Mummy." I froze. It was Eleanor. My daughter. Standing in the doorway. Alone. I turned in disbelief. There she stood, my daughter, clutching a toy rabbit and wearing the coat she usually left at nursery. Her cheeks were pink from the wind, her fringe damp from the light drizzle outside. "How did you get here?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. She pointed behind her. "I followed you from home. I saw you at the station. I didn't want you to go without me." Nathan stepped around the counter instinctively, crouching to her level. He smiled gently. "Hello, Eleanor." She looked up at him. Studied him. Not with fear, but with curiosity. "Are you Mummy's friend?" He hesitated. Then nodded once. "I suppose I am." I knelt beside her. My hands trembled as I checked her coat, her bag, her little shoes, all soaked at the edges. "You must never do that again, Eleanor. Do you understand me? You could have gotten hurt." "I'm not a baby," she interrupted, frowning. She turned back to Nathan. "Is this your bookshop?" He chuckled. "It is. Do you like books?" She nodded solemnly. "Mummy reads me stories every night. But Daddy stopped reading them." Nathan glanced at me. I looked away. She was too clever. Too observant. Too much like me. Nathan offered her a small, cloth-bound book from the shelf beside him. She opened it, wide-eyed, running a finger over the first page. As she wandered deeper into the store, I pulled Nathan aside. "What do we do now?" I whispered. He looked towards Eleanor. Then back at me. "Do you want me to disappear?" I couldn't answer. Not immediately. I had come to this place to draw a line under everything. To walk away with dignity intact and revenge completed. But now, in this shop filled with the scent of old paper and storm-drenched wood, I felt something shift again. There was no more pretending. I did not want him to disappear. Not entirely. "I don't know what this is," I said at last, "but it's no longer just about Charles." Nathan's gaze was steady. Warm. Real. It never was. "Not really." Eleanor called from across the room, holding a book aloft. "Can we read this one, Mummy?" I nodded. My throat was tight. Nathan pulled up 2 chairs and lit the small lamp beside us. As I read aloud, Eleanor curled against me, and Nathan sat silently nearby, listening, present in the moment. There was nothing romantic about it, no grand declarations, just the 3 of us and a story between pages. But it felt more intimate than anything I had shared with Charles in years. When we closed the book, Eleanor yawned. "Can we stay here, Mummy?" I kissed her forehead. "Not tonight, love." She didn't protest. As Nathan fetched her coat, he placed a note in my palm. Short. Direct. "Tomorrow. Breakfast. If you want to talk." Then he smiled once more and vanished into the soft hush of his shop. I walked Eleanor back to the station, her hand wrapped in mine. That night, as I tucked her into bed, I found myself wondering something I never thought I'd ask. What if the man I hired to destroy someone else's fantasy was the one who might help rebuild mine? Breakfast was simple. A pot of tea, a plate of buttered toast, and silence that was warm instead of awkward. Nathan met me in a small cafe tucked into the corner of a quiet street in Bath. Rain tapped lightly at the window, and the smell of fresh croissants lingered in the air. He looked different. Softer, somehow. As though the last few weeks had stripped away whatever mask he once wore. I stirred my tea, searching for the right words. I never meant for you to get involved. Nathan smiled faintly. But I did. Voluntarily. You asked me to seduce Tessa, not fall in love with her. I looked up quickly. Did you? No, he said, gently. But she did fall for me. That much I know. He reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the table. A ring. Not mine. Not his. Tessa's. She gave it to me last night. Said she was leaving Charles. That I had opened her eyes. I stared at it, stunned. The final move in a game I no longer had the heart to play. So that's it? I murmured. He tilted his head. Isn't that what you wanted? I shook my head slowly. My fingers tightened around the cup. I wanted revenge. I got it. But now, it all feels so hollow. Because revenge never fills the cracks, Nathan said softly. The waiter brought more toast. Neither of us touched it. I don't even know who I am anymore, I confessed. I was a wife, a mother, a solicitor. Now I'm just a woman who hired a man to seduce her husband's mistress and accidentally found something she didn't expect. Nathan leaned forward. And what was that? I met his eyes. Someone who listened. Who didn't want anything from me except the truth. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, let's stop playing games, Eleanor. I like you. Not out of pity, or thrill, or circumstance. Just because I do. The tears threatened again. But I swallowed them down. And what about Tessa? She left Charles for you. Nathan exhaled. She'll survive. She was never in love with Charles. She was in love with the idea of being loved. It's different. I stood. Nathan did too. The cafe was beginning to fill with the noise of the late morning rush. What happens now? I asked, not hiding the uncertainty. He smiled. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to decide today. Or even tomorrow. But if you ever want to turn the page. He handed me a folded piece of paper. His address. Nothing more. No pressure. No promises. Just a door that might be opened. I walked out of the cafe and felt the rain hit my face. It wasn't cold. Not anymore. That evening, Charles called. His voice was hollow. Angry, confused, desperate. I let it go to voicemail. In the kitchen, Eleanor danced to the radio, a wooden spoon in one hand and her toy rabbit in the other. She looked at me and giggled. Dance with me, Mummy. And so I did. Because at last, the game was over. And I was finally ready to start again, on my own terms.